Hi, and welcome to a video for Pompeii and Herculaneum students. And this video is going to focus on the site layout or the plans of the two towns and the streetscapes, what it actually looks like. Let's make a start with Pompeii. So, what does Pompeii actually look like? Well, here is a Google Map version. So this is the modern layout of Pompeii. And just to help you a little bit, this here within the red, that's basically the walls of Pompeii. And do we want to get a sense of how big it is? Well, it's 66 hectares. What's that? Think 66 big football fields put together. And if you want even a little bit more information, if I was to walk from the Marine Gate down here, all the way past the Forum, through the town, through all these different areas, and all the way up to the amphitheatre here, you're talking about a kilometre of walking. So it's not a massive city, but it is a reasonable sized town and an amazing archaeological preserved site for us to explore. Only about 2/3 of Pompeii have been excavated. You can see a number of areas on the map here where excavation has not yet taken place. How many people lived in Pompeii? We think about 20,000, and we don't quite know. We don't really know, but that's our estimate. And the wall itself along this red line, if you were to walk all the way around it, it's 3.2 kilometres long. So as you can see, looking at this, there's quite a few people would have been crammed inside of Pompeii and its walls. Here is a black and white map for us, and around these edges here we can actually see that there were cliff faces, so there was some natural protection for these original parts of the town. But then we do get the wall built in at a later date, and this is what the wall still looks like, and you can even see the defensive tower here that would have taken place. So on the map, that's where I was just there with that photograph showing you some of the back wall and a defensive tower. But another important feature of Pompeii is, of course, the gates, because if you've got a wall, you need gates to get in and out. And there are actually 8 different gates around Pompeii. These names of the gates that have been given to it are modern names. A lot of the houses, the streets, we give them modern names. Archaeologists have given them the names. What were they called in ancient times? We don't know. But we've given them these names, and these are the kinds of names you might become familiar with in terms of understanding where things are positioned within Pompeii. Over here on the left, we've got the Marine Gate, and so this went down to the river and the port area. There are actually quite a number of buildings out on each side here, including a bathhouse. And so there was a lot of activity on the river side with ships docking, things being loaded and unloaded. And this would have been one of the main entrances into the town, pedestrian access and the cart access here. Here's another gate, the Herculaneum gate. Again, you can see it's kind of half disappeared here. Now, by the time we get to 79 AD, these probably were not highly secured gates, but they do show that at a particular point in time, before the Romans attacked, that there was a need, a sense of security required in the town, and certainly through these gateways they could have controlled traffic, people, as well as been able to defend the town from a siege. If you take a look at Pompeii, the other thing you'll notice is the grid layout. And it's interesting because look at this map of Pompeii, the purpley pink bit here is actually the oldest part of Pompeii, built by the original Etruscans, who we think founded the town. You can see it's a little bit more irregular, but by the time we get into this blue area, with an extension by the Samnites, they had Greek influence, and we start to see this grid influence. And certainly by the time the Romans came and really started to expand the town, we've got beautiful, uniform, grid-like approach. And so we can also see some of this cross street kind of thing happening, and we can talk about our different cross streets. So the decumanus is the street going roughly east-west, and our cardos going roughly north-south. And the names that are given to them today, again, modern names. So this one, the Street of Abundance, or the Via dell'Abbondanza, called the Street of Abundance because of all the shops. This was like the shopping strip where you could get things to eat, things to drink, and buy lots of different things. So modern names given to these towns, but it's interesting to see this grid-like structure, an important part of the feature of the streetscape. But the other thing you can see on this map is some of these are larger roads and some of them are smaller kind of back streets. So let's take a look at some of these streets. Here's a nice back street, nice and quiet, not particularly interesting. This is just the back of a house, not even many windows or anything along here. But straight away you can see, even in this back street, it is paved with volcanic stone. You've got a raised footpath, and it's Pompeii. You've got a stepping stone. Now, why would you need a stepping stone? Because Pompeii does not have a sewage system. And so not only lots of water, because when it rains, it often rains very heavily, but also rubbish, things that people have just thrown into the street or put in the street. And so on a yucky day, you'd want those stepping stones to be able to cross the street without getting your feet wet and slopping, dirty and horrible. This is a back street, this one slightly wider. Again, you can see the stepping stones, the raised footpaths, and along this street, you're starting to get a number of shop fronts, so shops that you could actually pop into. And here's an even wider street. Look, 3 stepping stones wide, this one. But the other thing that you can really see here is these ruts, wheel ruts. And what this is, it's wear and tear from carts, cart wheels going over the stone. Imagine how many carts must have gone over this to erode, to wear away the stone. The other thing it shows us is that the stepping stones are not barriers to cart traffic. In fact, they are placed just wide enough so that the carts could nicely move over the top of the stepping stones. So they're not barriers, they are stepping stones to get across the street in the bad weather. These real wheel ruts are really great to show us about the traffic flow within Pompeii, because some streets don't have these wheel ruts at all, others have quite a lot of them, and tell us something about the traffic flow around the town itself. Here's a raised footpath. It's quite interesting. Here's a modern day Italian worker, and what he's doing is he's actually pouring modern concrete to reinforce the pathways, make them more accessible for tourists, particularly those with mobility issues. But we have to question, is he ruining the archaeology, or is he just making it more accessible and actually protecting it? An ethical issue for us to discuss, perhaps later. The other thing about Pompeii, of course, is we've got streets and we've got beautiful big open public spaces with public buildings. We'll talk more about what those particular public buildings are, but just to give you a sense, here's a shot from the Forum. Now this is a big, wide, open space. It would have been paved in marble back in the day. Here's the beautiful Capitoline Temple, and you can see here lots and lots of room for people to meet and greet, and today lots of tourists to actually come and take up lots of space. One of the other things we want to look at, though, on this grid layout is the idea of an insula. Now, an insula, or 2 insulae, are a block within the city. And so we talk about an insula. So one like this, for example, up here, contains a beautiful big villa, big house, called the House of the Silver Wedding. But it doesn't take up the whole block. It takes up quite a bit. There's another couple houses in the same insula, but also a number of small commercial premises, so a few shops along here as well. So we've got a mix of different types of buildings in the same insula. Here's another one, down here, again, a number of smaller houses, but also we know the fullery, the laundry of Stephanus, so-called the fullery of Stephanus. So we have quite a number of different types of properties within the one insula. Here's an example along here where you can start to see these are shop fronts. They would have all been individual little workshops or shops that would have sold things. Over on this side along this street, we've got little taverns, thermopolium, so you can buy hot food. Up in the distance here, you can start to see some larger residential areas, and another feature of Pompeii, not just single story, but double story houses as well. Again, our nice wide here paved road with a raised footpath on each side. Just to show you these two stories, of course, because of the destruction, we don't have a lot of the second stories left, but here are our beautiful stairs up to, well, today nowhere, but of course they would have led somewhere in the past. Sometimes an insula does not have a mix. Sometimes, like this one down here, the estate of Julia Felix, it's a beautiful big villa, a house that took up an entire beautiful block. It's got gardens. It's actually got their own bathhouse on the premises. It's interesting though, because we know that Julia Felix had divided her stuff up and she was actually renting out rooms and parts of her premises. We know that because we actually have the lease notice letting out places within. But you can see here the beautiful gardens. This is a lovely water feature and a really, beautiful way to use up this block. But it's not only houses, residential, commercial, but inside the walls of Pompeii, we even have horticulture, growing things, okay? So down here, for example, we've got a vineyard planted with fruit trees as well, and here you can see a shot. They've actually, because of archaeology, tried to discover what kinds of trees and plants and vines would have been here. They've tried to recreate it. So this is the wall. So I'm actually here up on the wall looking back into Pompeii, and you can see this big mix of different kinds of buildings and what it might have looked like as you were walking around Pompeii. Amory and Curran tell us that Pompeii has been described as a confused jumble of shops, workshops, crafts, residential and horticultural plots and houses across the whole city, with no real attempt at commercial segregation or concentration, beyond the tendency of shops to line the main roads and horticulture, the plant stuff, to cluster at the margins. It's a really interesting quote for us to think about if we're thinking about the layout and the way that Pompeii is structured. One last thing we really need to just focus on, of course, is the streetscapes. We've got public fountains, and these are for common use. If you were rich enough, of course, you'd have the water pumped directly into your house, but most of the people in Pompeii would have obtained their water from these public facilities, and you can see today the water is still even running. Okay, that's enough on Pompeii. Oh no, I want to show you one more thing. We haven't seen any tombs. Why? They're not inside the walls of Pompeii. According to Roman custom, the tombs are outside. So as you actually walk out of the Herculaneum gate and start to walk along the street here, you find tombs. You'll find tombs down here, tombs out this way as well. Tombs such as this. So you can see walking along the street lined with tombs, which would have been visited regularly. So tombs not inside the walls, but part of the streetscape just outside of the walls of the city. That ends our overview of Pompeii, and we'll have a separate short video to take a look at the layout and the streetscape of Herculaneum.